That night I replayed the footage again, even though the snow-lit Christmas corridor had already shown me enough. My wife didn't pull away when he wrapped his arms around her, didn't flinch when their cheeks touched, didn't hesitate when he kissed her softly under the blinking holiday lights. And the part that broke me wasn't the embrace. It was realizing the man she chose wasn't a stranger. It was Mark, the friend I once trusted more than myself. I didn't go looking for evidence that night. I wasn't one of those husbands who checked phones, tracked locations, or questioned every late meeting. I trusted Emily. God knows I trusted her more than I trusted myself. But something felt wrong the moment I walked into the house, the way her eyes flicked toward the hallway, before she greeted me, the way she tightened her scarf, even though the living room was warm. It was a small shift, barely noticeable, but enough to twist something inside my chest. Maybe that's why I checked the footage again. I'd installed the camera in the Christmas corridor 2 weeks earlier. Not because I suspected anything sinister. It was just supposed to be a seasonal decoration, a small security add-on tied to the string lights. A festive idea. A harmless one. The kind husbands do without thinking too much. But the moment I tapped on the thumbnail and saw Emily step through the front door earlier that evening, I knew I was about to see something I couldn't undo. She walked in carrying a gift bag, shaking snow from her hair. She looked beautiful. Too beautiful in a way that made my stomach tighten. She shut the door halfway, then froze, not in fear, in anticipation. A man's hand slid between the door and the frame. My breathing stopped. He stepped inside casually, as if he belonged there. The second he lowered his hood, my chest cracked open. Mark, of all people. Mark, my friend, my brother in everything but blood. The man I had shared beers, birthdays, and heartbreaks with. The man who disappeared from my life without warning 5 years ago. The man I mourned like a lost family member. And he was standing in my home, in my hallway, behind my wife. I leaned closer to the screen, hoping, begging for any sign that I was misreading this. And for half a second, I convinced myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he came by with a gift. Maybe it was a surprise for me. Then I saw Emily smile. Not the polite smile she used in public. Not the tired one she gave me lately. This was soft, warm, familiar. The kind of smile a woman gives a man she's been missing. Mark stepped closer, brushing snow from his jacket. Emily reached out, not to push him away, but to straighten his collar. A small gesture. Intimate. Practiced. My fingers went numb. Her hand stayed on his chest longer than it should have. Mark looked down at her with the same expression he used to give when he was about to say something he knew he shouldn't. I turned up the volume. I shouldn't have. I missed you, Mark whispered. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't confused. It was certain, like missing her had been a long, intentional habit. Emily's lips parted. She lowered her head, her breath fogging in the cold light of the camera. I know, she whispered back. The sound knocked the air out of me. I slammed my hand against the couch cushion just to stop myself from hurling the phone across the room. My ears rang so loudly, I almost shut the video off, but something inside me Some sick, masochistic part of the human heart needed to see all of it. Mark lifted a hand and swept a strand of hair from Emily's cheek. She closed her eyes, not reluctantly, but as if the touch was familiar. As if it was welcome. Then he leaned in, not to her mouth, but to her cheek. A small kiss. Soft, slow, intimate, in a way that cut deeper than full betrayal. Emily didn't push him away. She didn't freeze. She didn't even hesitate. She tilted her face slightly, giving him better access. My pulse hammered through my skull. My throat tightened so hard it felt like I swallowed glass. I paused the video and stared at the frozen frame, Mark's lips on her cheek, her hand resting on his chest, their bodies almost pressed together under the golden Christmas lights. I had hung myself. That was the moment I realized the betrayal wasn't new. This wasn't a sudden slip. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a routine, something old, something practiced, something continued. I wiped my face. I didn't even realize tears had formed. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind men never admit to. The kind that burn more than they fall. I hit play again. Mark wrapped his arms around her from behind. Emily leaned back into him, her head resting lightly against his chest. A perfect fit. A practiced fit. A fit that had nothing to do with me. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, and out. Because the part that terrified me more than the betrayal was how gently she held him. How safe she looked in his arm. Safer than she ever looked with me in the past year. I paused the video again and threw the phone onto the couch. Emily walked into the living room at that exact moment. She looked at me, really looked, and something flickered in her expression. She knew, not that I saw, but that something inside me broke. "John," she said softly, "are you okay?" I stared at her lips, still faintly tinted from the cold. At the cheek Mark kissed. At the scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, the one he touched first. "I'm fine," I said, and somehow saying those two words hurt more than watching the kiss. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't fine. I wouldn't be fine. Not now. Not ever. Because the woman I loved wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. And the man who took her from me was the one person I never questioned, never doubted, never guarded myself against. Mark didn't just betray me. He dismantled the last piece of my life I thought was still safe. I kept the phone face down on the couch cushion. As Emily moved around the kitchen, the soft clinks of mugs and spoons echoing down the hallway. The normalcy of it all made the betrayal hurt even sharper, like she was stirring sugar into cocoa for me, with the same hands she had rested on Mark's chest less than an hour earlier. I stared at the paused footage, at the exact frame where Mark leaned in and pressed his lips to her cheek. The Christmas lights along the hallway glowed warmly behind them. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't uncomfortable. She wasn't resisting. It was intimacy, quiet, practiced, familiar. I needed time to breathe, to think, to feel without exploding. So I pushed the phone aside and stood up slowly. like someone recovering from a wound the body hadn't acknowledged yet. Emily's voice drifted from the kitchen. "John, do you want marshmallows or not?" Her voice was soft, careful. A careful voice is always suspicious. I walked toward the hallway, not to confront her, not yet, but because I needed to see the place where it happened with my own eyes. The corridor was lit just like in the video. Our string of warm Christmas bulbs ran along the railing, casting a golden glow over the hardwood floor. Emily had decorated today garland, draped over picture frames, a wreath at the far end. It looked festive, peaceful, alive. But all I could see was Mark's hand sliding along her waist. All I could hear was the whispered, "I missed you." All I could feel was the moment her body leaned into his. I knelt, touching the exact spot where her back had pressed against the wall during the hug. The wood felt warm, not cold, like betrayal was supposed to feel. I stood slowly and walked the length of the hall, trying to imagine the sound of their breathing, the soft laughter I saw on her lips, the quiet familiarity between them. Emily had never touched me that gently in months. That truth, small but brutal, crushed me more than the kiss. I checked the door frame next. No scuffs, no footprints, nothing indicating a second pair of shoes had crossed the threshold. Mark knew how to hide his presence. He had always been good at that, slipping in and out of situations without leaving a trace. He used to joke about it, calling himself the perfect alibi, because nobody ever noticed when he entered or left a room. Now he was using that same talent to walk into my home, wrap his arms around my wife, and disappear like a ghost. My fists clenched. I wasn't going to be a ghost in my own life. John, Emily called from the kitchen. "Are you okay?" I forced my voice steady. "Yeah, just checking the thermostat." Lie for lie, silence for silence. I walked back to the living room and picked up my phone again, replaying the final moments of the clip. Mark's hand settled at the small of her back. An intimate place, a place you don't touch unless you feel entitled to someone's body. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't step away. She didn't even glance at the camera. She trusted the angle wasn't catching her. She trusted I wasn't watching. And Mark looked completely at home in my hallway. When Emily finally stepped back into the living room, she handed me a mug with trembling hands. She wasn't nervous about me. She was nervous about whether the night was truly over. I accepted the mug and stared at her fingers. They weren't trembling from carrying hot cocoa. They were trembling from guilt. But guilt can't exist without conscience. And there was something in her eyes, uncertainty, panic, calculation, that made me wonder if she was afraid of what she'd done or afraid of being caught. She sat across from me, her knee bouncing ever so slightly. "Long day at work." "Yeah," I said. A lie again. A lie that matched hers. She sipped her cocoa and forced a smile that came meant to bring a house back to normal after a quiet argument. Except this wasn't quiet. Not for me. The silence between us was a battlefield littered with evidence I hadn't shown her yet. I pretended to scroll through emails while watching her from the corner of my eye. She tugged her sweater down her wrist, a nervous habit she always had when she was keeping something from me. She avoided my gaze. She didn't ask about my day again. She didn't reach for my hand. It was like she had to rehearse being my wife again, after spending time being something else to another man. I couldn't sit there any longer. I stood up. I'm going to check something outside, I said. Outside, it's freezing. I won't be long. I stepped out into the cold. Snow had stopped falling, but the ground was still covered. I walked through the yard, searching for any sign of marked tire tracks, footprints, anything. But the snow was smooth. Either he left before the snowfall, or he stayed long enough for the snow to cover his exit, or he'd parked far away and walked. All three possibilities made my blood run cold, especially the last one. When I returned inside, Emily was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, like she'd been waiting anxiously for me to come back. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said again, the same lie, the same tone. Her eyes searched me, as though she was trying to measure how much I knew. I didn't give her anything, because now I had something she didn't know. The footage wasn't the end of it. I still had access to the full corridor camera, the motion logs, the timestamps, the audio filters. I could find everything, and I would. I walked past her without another word, taking my phone with me to the bedroom. I shut the door gently, not slamming, not loud, because quiet anger is the most dangerous kind. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the camera app again, and pulled up every clip from the last 72 hours. If Mark had been here tonight, he could have been here yesterday, or the day before, or the week before. I scrubbed through clips one after another until a timestamp caught my eye. 2 nights ago, 11:22 p.m., front door, motion detected. In the clip, the door cracked open just enough for someone to slip inside. Not Emily. Not me. A man, tall, broad shoulders. Mark. He'd been here more than once. He wasn't just a mistake. He was a pattern. And I wasn't a husband anymore. I was the last person to find out. I don't remember walking back into the living room. I don't remember sitting down. All I remember is the footage replaying in my head in crisp, merciless detail, the way Mark pulled her in with a familiarity I hadn't seen in years, the way Emily leaned into him like she knew exactly where she belonged. The kind of closeness you don't build overnight. The kind you practice. Emily entered a moment later carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. The steam curled around her face, softening the edges of a woman who, just an hour ago, I would have sworn I understood. She set the mug in front of me carefully, like she was afraid of waking a sleeping animal. "Here," she said gently. "It might help you relax." Relax, my wife offering comfort right after I watched her in another man's arms. "Thanks," I murmured, because pretending was easier than exploding. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her own mug. Her eyes flicked to my face, studying me, searching for signs I'd seen something. But she didn't ask. She didn't risk it. That's when it hit me. She wasn't worried I'd misunderstand. She was worried I'd understand perfectly. I looked down at the cocoa, watched the swirl of chocolate and heat. She used to make this for me every December, a small Christmas ritual, a small sign of affection. Now it tasted like camouflage. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady, "did anything unusual happen tonight?" Her fingers tightened slowly on the mug, small enough that someone who didn't know her might miss it. But I caught it. I saw everything now. "No," she said too quickly. "I just decorated a bit, like I said. The lights in the hallway kept flickering, so I fixed a few things." Flickering lights. She used that excuse before. She always reached for it when she needed a quick justification. Lights don't betray you. Lights don't talk back. Lights don't ask why another man's hands were on your hips. Did you run into anyone outside? I pressed. She shook her head. It's snowing too hard. Nobody's walking around at this hour, except Mark. Except the man she let in without hesitation. I looked up at her, and for a second I almost said his name out loud. But something stopped me, a deeper instinct. If she knew I'd seen the footage, she'd change her behavior. She'd hide better. She'd lie cleaner. I needed her truth, not her damage control. A beat of silence passed between us. She looked away first. I'm going to head upstairs, she said quietly. Long day. She left the room, like a woman carrying a fragile secret beneath her ribs. As soon as she disappeared into the hallway, I set the cocoa aside, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. The snow bit at my cheeks, stinging sharp, like the truth I'd been avoiding for too long. I walked around the side of the house, scanning the ground for footprints. Emily wasn't wrong about the snowfall. The world was already being buried in white. But the snow was fresh enough that any disturbance would still show. And there they were. 2 sets of prints. One smaller, lighter, Emily's. One larger, heavier, Mark's. They led straight from the street right to the side door, the one Emily never uses. The one that bypasses the front hall camera. Except tonight's meeting wasn't meant to be hidden from a camera. It was meant to be hidden from me. I crouched down, fingertips brushing the indentations in the snow. The depth, the stride Mark had been here recently. Within the last hour, my pulse hammered. The idea that he'd walked these steps with my wife, touched her in my home, breathed the same cold air I was breathing now. Rage rose in my chest, hot and bitter. I followed the prints back to the street, half hoping they'd disappear, half hoping I'd find something, anything to tell me this wasn't what it seemed. But it was exactly what it seemed. A car was parked. 1 block down, engine still warm. I recognized the shape instantly. Mark always drove the same kind of car, a dark blue truck, the kind he used to brag could survive a war. I approached it slowly. The windows were fogged on the inside. Because someone had been sitting in it. Waiting. Watching. The snow on the windshield had melted in one spot. A circle, the size of a head pressed forward. He'd been sitting there, looking at my house, looking for her, looking for the moment he could slip back in. A sudden movement caught my eye, a small rectangle on the passenger seat. I stepped closer, a wrapped Christmas gift, with a tag, to E, not Emily, not my wife, just E. Intimate, secretive, familiar. I stepped back from the truck before I put my fist through the window. The snow thickened, falling harder, blurring the streetlights and softening the edges of the world, like the night itself was trying to shield me from a truth I already knew. Mark wasn't visiting. Mark wasn't reconnecting. Mark wasn't passing through town. Mark was back. And Emily hadn't just forgiven him, she'd invited him in. Back inside, I wiped the snow from my coat and headed toward the stairs. Halfway up, I saw a sliver of warm light spilling from the crack under our bedroom door. Emily's silhouette moved behind it, pacing, worried, restless. Not for me, for him. I stood there, one hand on the banister, feeling the house close around me. Not like a home, but like a quiet observer, holding a secret larger than both of us. The door creaked open. Emily froze when she saw me on the stairs. "John, what are you doing down there?" I looked at her for a long moment. I could ask you the same question. And for the first time that night, she looked guilty. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the footage. Not because Mark's voice kept replaying in my head low, familiar, intimate, the way a man speaks only to someone he's already crossed a line with. No, I stayed awake because Emily didn't. She slept too quickly, too deeply, too peacefully for someone who'd just lied to her husband's face. And lying awake beside her, listening to the slow rhythm of her breathing, I realized something with the brutal clarity that only comes after midnight. If a woman can sleep right after betraying you, she's not confused. She's comfortable. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, though a part of me wondered if anything I did could disturb the sleep of someone who'd already settled into a different life, a different man's arms. The house was silent as I moved through the hallway. The Christmas lights Emily had hung glowed faint yellow, stretching long shadows across the walls like the ghosts of every lie between us. I stopped halfway down the corridor, staring at the exact place in the footage where Mark held her, touched her hair, kissed her cheek. It felt like standing on a crime scene, only the victim was still alive and trying to pretend the bullet wasn't lodged in his chest. I pulled out my phone again, not to rewatch the footage, not to torture myself, but to open something else, something I should have checked weeks ago, maybe months. Emily's notifications. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. She always left it face down, an old habit, one I once thought was cute. Now it felt like a warning sign I'd ignored for too long. I unlocked it, not because I didn't trust her, but because trust had already been killed on camera. The first thing I noticed was a hidden conversation in an archived folder, not labeled Mark, not even under his initials. It was saved as M, a single letter. Simple, safe, only meaningful to the two people protecting it. I opened it. The thread wasn't long, not the kind filled with endless messages, or emojis, or late-night confessions. It was worse. It was careful, measured, controlled. The way two people communicate when they're trying not to get caught. The most recent message sat at the top. I'm outside. In the same place. Sent at 7:32 p.m., 1 hour before I reviewed the footage. Emily's reply came 10 seconds later. Emily. Yes, don't ring. Back door. My heart stalled. Back door. She hadn't even used the front hallway for Mark. Only the camera caught them later by accident, when they were returning from somewhere she didn't want recorded. Somewhere darker. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere Mark had trusted enough to walk into my home, like he belonged there. I scrolled further up. You sure he won't come home early? Emily. He never does. I closed my eyes. Never. As if she knew my patterns better than I did. As if she'd spent time building a schedule around my absence, not my presence. Another message. You were shaking last time. Emily. Because it was wrong. My heart kicked. Wrong. Finally, something I could hold on to. Proof she felt guilty. Proof she hesitated. Proof my wife still knew what this was. But then her next message sank into me like a blade. Emily. But it didn't feel wrong. I had to sit down. The chair beneath me creaked. The house too quiet for the sound. For a moment, I couldn't tell if the ringing in my ears was fury, or heartbreak, or both, But I wasn't finished. I scrolled higher. Another exchange from earlier in the week. When I held you last time, it felt like everything made sense again. Emily. Don't say that. Please. Why not? Emily, because it's true. My hands shook. I didn't know which hurt more, the footage, the kiss, Mark's voice, or the realization that Emily had loved someone else long before I caught them. I scrolled again. At the top of the thread sat the oldest message from her. Emily, you disappeared for years. Why now? Mark's reply came an hour later. Because I promised myself I'd only come back when I knew something about you. Emily. About me. About us. I froze. Us. Not her, not him. Us. The word wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. It was a confession. I scrolled back down until I reached last night's final message before they met. Emily. Christmas lights are up. The hallway looks beautiful. I'll see it tonight then. She didn't tell him no. She didn't tell him not to come. She didn't tell him I might catch them. She invited him into the part of the house she decorated for me. Not for guests, not for neighbors, for the man she married. Yet the message that broke me wasn't from him. It was from her. Sent just 50 minutes before the footage. Emily, only a minute. Then you have to go. A minute. Just one. They had only intended to see each other briefly, but a minute was enough for him to touch her hair. A minute was enough for him to hold her. A minute was enough to kiss her cheek. A minute was enough to ruin everything. I put the phone down, my pulse thundering. The house felt different now, tainted, hollow, and suddenly too small for the air I was trying to breathe. Emily walked in holding a mug of hot cocoa, smiling the soft, rehearsed smile she used whenever she thought I looked distressed. Here, she said, setting it in front of me. I added cinnamon. I know you like it. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw the woman who told another man. It didn't feel wrong. I also saw something else. Something I hadn't noticed until the footage forced my eyes open. Her hair, slightly messy on one side, not from sleep, from fingers. His fingers. Mark's. Emily didn't realize she hadn't fixed it. She didn't need to. She thought I had never noticed. But I noticed everything now. She turned away, humming softly, as she walked back toward the living room. And as I watched her cross the Christmas-lit hallway, I realized I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something infinitely worse. Awake. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think any man in my position could. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that settles it. Was the kind that waits. Emily had gone to bed pretending we were fine. Pretending I hadn't seen what I saw. Pretending she didn't know Mark had walked into our home like he belonged here. But I knew she felt it. The weight, the shift, the way the floorboards carried a different rhythm beneath my feet. Like the truth had soaked into the wood. I stayed in the hallway long after she'd closed the bedroom door. Every Christmas light reflected back at me in tiny, trembling fragments. It almost looked pretty peaceful, innocent, until I remembered what had happened here only hours earlier. Emily, leaning into Mark's chest, Mark's hand resting on her hip, her face turning toward his mouth brushing her cheek. I pressed my fingers to my temple, but the pressure did nothing. The image was too sharp, too fresh, too real. At some point past midnight, the house shifted a soft crack, the natural settling of wood, but it made me lift my head. I looked down the length of the hallway again. This time, I wasn't looking for Mark. I was looking for myself. The man I used to be. The man I thought Emily loved. The man she used to wait for at this very spot. But he wasn't here. He hadn't been here for a long time. I finally turned away and walked to the bedroom. Emily lay wrapped in the thick Christmas quilt we bought in Colorado years ago. She looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, like she'd practiced this kind of sleep, like she'd learned how to close her eyes and bury everything beneath them. I stood in the doorway a long moment, watching the way her chest rose and fell. A rhythm she once let me hold, with my own body pressed against hers. I wondered if Mark ever watched her sleep like this, if she let him. The thought scraped against my ribs. I walked to my side of the bed and lay down carefully, not wanting to wake her. The mattress sank slightly, and she stirred only for a second, then settled again. "John," she whispered into the darkness. My throat tightened. Not because she said my name, but because she said it like she wasn't sure if she still had the right. "I'm here," I said. She turned toward me slowly, her face only half visible through the thin glow of the streetlight outside. "Did you stay up late?" she asked softly. "Yes." She hesitated, thinking about work. There it was again. The lie she offered the moment she sensed danger. The lie she hoped I'd choose, so she wouldn't have to explain her own. "No," I said. Her breath caught. I didn't give her more. Not tonight, not yet. I turned her onto my back. She didn't move for a long time. When she finally did, it was tiny. Just the faintest shift of her hand reaching toward me beneath the blanket. Not touching, not daring, just hovering. Hoping for forgiveness she hadn't earned. I didn't take her hand. After a few seconds, she slowly pulled it back. The silence stayed between us like a body neither of us wanted to touch. By morning, Emily woke earlier than usual. She moved quietly, as if not to disturb something fragile. I stayed in bed long enough to hear her footsteps leave the room, then I stood and looked around. Her red scarf was missing, the one she'd worn last night, the one Mark had touched. I felt heat rise in my chest. Not anger, not rage, but something tighter, something I couldn't name yet. I followed the faint smell of coffee to the kitchen. Emily stood at the counter, stirring a mug, with nervous mechanical motions. She jumped slightly when she saw me. "Good morning," she said, softer than usual. "I didn't want to wake you." I nodded, and she picked up the mug and slid it across the counter toward me. Her hand shook, just once, but enough to reveal everything she was trying to hide. "Busy day ahead?" she asked. Maybe I said. She nodded too quickly, like she needed that answer to be enough. For her. For us. For the lie she thought was still intact. But I wasn't giving her easy ground today. I leaned against the counter and let the question fall out of me. "Did Mark come by last night?" She froze. Not a flinch, not a gasp, but a freeze, like someone had pressed pause on her entire body. Then she turned her back to me. For the first time since I caught her, she couldn't even pretend anymore. I didn't push, not yet, because I needed her to walk into the truth herself. To stumble into it, to fall into it. I finished my coffee, placed the mug in the sink, and walked away. Emily stood still the whole time, and I realized something as I stepped back into the hallway. The footage wasn't the worst part. The worst part was waiting to see how many nights before this one she'd walked into Mark's arms. Emily didn't leave the kitchen for almost 10 minutes after I walked out. I heard every quiet breath she took, each one more unsteady than the last. And when she finally emerged, her steps were too careful, like the entire floor had become a minefield. She was terrified of triggering. She approached me slowly, where I stood in the hallway staring at the place I'd seen her pressed against Mark's chest. I didn't know Mark was back in town, she said. A lie. Smooth practice draped in innocence. I didn't turn to her. He stopped by. A beat. Too long. Yes, she finally said. I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. Her hand tightened around her own wrist. He said he wanted to talk about you. My eyes narrowed slightly. About me. Yes. And he needed to put his hands on you for that. Emily went pale. She stepped back just once, like the air between us had turned solid. John, she whispered, please. I finally faced her. She wasn't scared of me, she was scared of the truth she'd been cornered into confronting. You said he came to talk about me, I repeated. Was that before or after he kissed your cheek? Her lips parted. Her eyes filled. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her silence was the first honest thing she'd given me in months. Emily, I said quietly, don't lie to me again. She lifted her hands as if to steady herself. John, it didn't mean, it wasn't what you think. But the tears forming in her eyes weren't from guilt. They were from fear. Fear of losing the world she'd built with two men. One she married, one she let back in. So I asked the question that mattered most. How long? Her breathing stalled. How long have you been seeing him? Emily shook her head violently. No. No, John, please. You're twisting this. How long? Her back pressed against the wall. Her fingers trembled. And when she finally answered, her voice sounded like something breaking. It wasn't supposed to happen, which wasn't an answer, not a denial, not an apology. It was a confession. I stepped closer, not threatening, just present. The way a man should be when he finally looks at the truth without blinking. You chose him, I said. Emily closed her eyes, a tear slipping free. No, she whispered. I didn't choose him. I just didn't stop him. That hurt worse than anything else she could have said. Not that she wanted him, but that she didn't protect us. Emily, I said softly. Did you love him? Her eyes opened slowly, and the silence she gave me was the most devastating answer of all. Before either of us could speak, again, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow, confident knocks. Emily's breath stopped. She didn't need to open it, neither did I. We both knew exactly who had come back. Mark! I couldn't sleep the night I confronted the hallway. Not because of the footage. Not because of Mark's hands on my wife, but because every corner of the house felt like it had seen something before I did. Like the walls had known about the affair long before I caught up. It's humiliating when you realize your own home has been more aware than you. Emily went to bed early claiming a migraine, but her eyes told a different story. Fear. Not fear of me, fear of what I knew or what I might still discover. I stayed in the living room with only the small Christmas tree glowing beside me. Its warm lights didn't help. Warmth felt wrong now. Everything felt wrong. But one thing felt unmistakably right. I needed to see that hallway with my own eyes, not on a screen. but as the place where my wife let another man hold her, where Mark pressed his mouth to her cheek, where her fingers pulled him closer, where betrayal wasn't whispered, it was performed. So I stood up, turned off every light, except the ones in the hallway, and walked toward the place where my life had quietly collapsed. The closer I got, the tighter my stomach pulled, like a rope twisting inside me. That hallway had held 40 years of my memories, and 15 seconds of hers with Mark. 15 seconds were enough to burn through every year. I thought I understood her. I stepped into the hallway. The air was colder here. Not supernatural cold, just the kind of chill that comes from a place where someone once dropped the truth and left it lying around like broken glass. I stood exactly where Emily had stood in the footage. Then I walked a few steps forward to where Mark had stepped in behind her. I imagined his breath on her neck, his arms sliding around her, her leaning back as if she had been waiting for that exact moment. I felt sick, not because of the image, but because of how natural they looked together, how familiar she seemed with him, how gently she smiled up at him. Softness I hadn't seen directed toward me in months. I forced myself to inhale, slow, controlled. Then I did something I never thought I would do again. I pressed play, not on my phone, but on the security panel on the wall, the one Emily thought I never used. It held older footage she likely assumed I would never touch. And if someone hides an affair, they hide it where you're least likely to look. I tapped the date menu, scrolled up, 1 week back, 2, 3. On December 2nd, there was no hallway recording. On December 3rd, a 4-minute clip was missing. On December 5th, the camera had been disconnected for 2 hours. On December 9th, it recorded from 7 p.m. to 7:32 p.m., then cut out. The system could glitch once, maybe twice, but not 4 times. Not in the exact time frame Emily said she was running errands, shopping, or doing Christmas gifts alone. My jaw tightened. I pressed on December 12th, and there it was, a clip she forgot to delete, or thought she deleted. But the system had backed it up. I tapped play. Emily stepped into the hallway. She looked nervous. She kept checking her phone, pacing back and forth. She touched her hair, fixing it, smoothing it, fluffing it. I'd seen her do that, for me, on our first date, not in years since. Then the door opened. Mark stepped in. The way Emily froze at the sight of him, the way her lips parted, the way she breathed in sharply, almost like it hurt to see him. My hands trembled. Mark didn't waste time. He dropped his bag, stepped forward, and pulled her into him, like a man who wasn't kissing her for the first time. He pressed his forehead to hers. Her hands slid up his chest. His thumb brushed her lower lip. Then he kissed her, not the cheek, the mouth, soft, so like a man savoring what he already believed was his. Emily didn't push him away. She kissed him back, a small, hesitant kiss, but still a kiss. And then she whispered, "We shouldn't do this. Not here. Not again." My world tilted. Not again. I felt the floor sway, but I didn't fall. Anger kept me upright. But then Mark spoke, and what he said didn't just hurt. It destroyed something fundamental inside me. "He doesn't look at you anymore, Em." Her breath shook. Not from fear, from truth. And then she whispered the most honest thing she had said in years. That's why I can't stop. I closed the footage. Not because I couldn't watch more, but because I had finally seen enough. The affair wasn't an accident, wasn't a mistake, wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a continuation, a choice, a habit, a pattern they'd been feeding behind my back. And suddenly, the house that once felt like a sanctuary felt like the aftermath of a crime scene. I ran a hand along the wall. The cold didn't move, didn't breathe, but I felt something anyway. Resolve. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about heartbreak. This was about truth. And I wasn't done uncovering it, not even close. Emily was still awake when I walked back into the living room, though she pretended not to be. She sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her phone dimming in her hands, but her breathing pattern told me everything. She was waiting, listening, afraid. She didn't even look up when I approached. "You're up late," she murmured. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded, still staring at her phone. I stood there studying her silently. The way she avoided eye contact. The way her thumb hovered above her screen. The way she kept adjusting the blanket, though. She clearly wasn't cold. Emily, my wife, of 15 years, looked like a woman carrying two lives inside her. One she showed me, and one she showed someone else. "It's freezing tonight," she said, pulling the blanket tighter. "Maybe you should go to bed. You look exhausted."
Do I?
Yes. Her voice softened. "More than usual." "More than usual." That stung. "Emily," I said quietly, "where were you tonight before I got home?" She froze. Just for a second, but enough for me to see the guilt ripple through her shoulders. "I told you," she said, forcing a smile. "I was out buying Christmas gifts. Alone."
Yes.
I stepped closer. The room felt smaller. Her lies felt louder. "Which store?" I asked. She hesitated. "You know, the one near Oak Ridge." "There are 3 near Oak Ridge. I went to all of them." She wasn't even trying to lie well. And that made it worse. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it face down on the table between us. I checked the hallway camera. I said softly. Her entire body went rigid, slowly, painfully. She lifted her eyes to mine. And in that moment, I didn't see my wife. I saw the woman who kissed Mark in my home. She swallowed. "Why would you check that?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Because..." Her voice broke, but the lie still crawled forward. "Because there's nothing to see." There it was. The final string. The last insult. I flipped the phone over, tapped the screen, and let one still frame appear. Mark's hand on her waist, Emily, leaning into him, their lips brushing. She gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes went wide with horror. "John," she whispered, this isn't you don't understand. I understand everything I said." Her breath hitched as tears filled her eyes. Not sad tears. Not broken tears. Scared tears. "Please," she whispered. "Let me explain." Explain what I took a step closer. How long it's been happening. Another step. How many times? Another, or why you chose him of all people. "John, stop." "Why him, Emily?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It didn't break. It sharpened. "Why Mark?" She covered her face with both hands, shaking her head. "You left him," she whispered. "You cut him out. You told him to stay away from us." "And he listened," I said, "for years." She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red, full of guilt and something else. Resentment. "He didn't come back because of me," she whispered. "He came back because of what you did to him." "What I did?" She nodded slowly. "You let him fall apart. You walked away when he needed you most. And you never looked back. You abandoned him, John. The accusation hit deeper than I expected. Abandonment, a word I hadn't tasted in years. And what I whispered. You decided to pick him up where I left him. She didn't deny it. She didn't speak. She just looked away. A confession without words. The kind that cuts cleaner than anything spoken. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. I stared at her, not with anger, not with hatred, with clarity. Yes, I said. You did. She broke into tears, real ones this time. The kind that come from realizing you've been caught in the full light of truth. I stepped back. Emily reached for me, voice trembling. John, please don't walk away. But I wasn't walking away. Not yet. Because before the night ended, I needed to know one more thing. What else the house had seen that I hadn't. I didn't breathe when I stepped back into the Christmas corridor, that long, polished hallway that had betrayed me before my wife ever did. The string lights were still glowing soft gold, swaying slightly as if the entire house had exhaled. Emily stood at the far end, her hand pressed against the banister, her body tense and tight, like someone waiting for impact. She looked at me the way someone looks at a funeral, before realizing they're attending their own. John, she whispered, please, let me alone. Explain? There were 1,000 things she could explain. The late nights, the sudden distance, the half-hearted kisses that never quite reached me. But there was no explanation for the image burned into the inside of my skull, Mark pulling her into his chest. Her fingers curled into his coat, her cheek leaning toward his mouth because she wanted to feel him there. Some truths don't need words. They're obvious the moment you see who someone becomes when they think you're not watching. No more lies. I said, my voice low enough to silence everything around us. Tell me the truth. She didn't blink, didn't move, only swallowed, as if the truth had been stuck in her throat for months. Okay, she whispered, but please, let's not do this here. Why not here? I stepped closer, the hardwood creaking under my weight. This is where it happened, isn't it? Her eyes flinched. A tiny flicker, but enough. This is where you let him touch you, where you let him hold you, where you let him stop. Her voice cracked. Please, John, don't say it. I laughed once. It wasn't humor. It was disbelief, sharpened into something dangerous. You don't get to control the words anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't have to play the clip again. I just held the screen up, frozen. On the moment, Mark pressed his lips to her cheek. Emily's eyes filled instantly, with pain, with shame, with something else I didn't want to name. John, I made a mistake. Mistake, I repeated softly. You call this a mistake? She nodded slowly, as if her honesty had weight. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan it. I didn't look for it. But when he showed up, something inside me broke. Because you still love him? I asked. Silence. The kind of silence that decides the fate of a marriage. No, she whispered at last. No, John. I don't love him. I never loved him the way I love you. A hollow ache cut through my chest. Then why? She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. Because he showed up at a moment I felt invisible. Invisible. The word landed harder than any confession. I was grieving my mother. You were drowning in work. You stopped touching me. Stopped looking at me the way you used to. Every night I felt like I was fading. And Mark, he noticed. So you went to him, I said. I didn't go to him. She shot back, wiping at her tears. He came to me. He pushed. He asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. And I should have told him to leave. I should have shut the door. But I didn't. And yes, her voice cracked. I let him hold me. My jaw tightened. And the kiss. She closed her eyes again. That wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. Yes, she whispered brokenly. It did. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint buzz of Christmas lights. Then she spoke again, quieter. It was one kiss, John, one moment, but I swear to you it didn't go further. And does he believe that I asked? She hesitated. Hesitation is its own truth. Emily, how long? She shook her head violently. No, John. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't some ongoing thing. There weren't months of secrets. There wasn't more. But her voice wavered. The corridor didn't believe her. Neither did I. Why was he here tonight, I asked. This time her chest tightened before she answered. He came to say goodbye, she whispered. He said he was leaving town. He wanted closure. He wanted you, I corrected. Yes, she breathed. He did. And you let him. Her tears fell harder. I shouldn't have. I know I shouldn't have. But I was weak. I was lonely. I was hurting. And he... Then why didn't you tell me he came back? I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I knew if you saw him again, you'd remember why you stopped being friends. I stared at her, cold, still. What does that mean? She hesitated again. Emily, I said slowly, what did Mark do? She looked away, a full, deliberate turn of her head. The kind guilty people make when they're choosing which truth hurts least. He didn't just betray you now, she whispered. He betrayed you years ago. Something deep inside me shifted. A warning, a memory half buried under years of silence. Tell me. Her hands shook. Mark wasn't just your friend. He was jealous of you, envious, angry. He blamed you for everything that went wrong in his life. And when your business took off, he... Emily. My voice cut through hers. Tell me what he did. She finally looked at me. He came to our home that night because he wanted to take something from you. I felt my stomach drop. What was it, I asked, quietly. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Because the front door handle rattled. Once, twice, then slowly you turned. Emily froze, and I knew even before the door opened, Mark hadn't left town. He had come back for her. Or for me. Or for everything he thought he was owed. The door creaked open. Snow blew in, and Mark stepped into my house as if he owned the place. Mark stood framed in the doorway, no dusting his hair and shoulders like he'd walked straight out of a nightmare I'd tried not to name. His eyes swept the room, then locked onto Emily first. Of course they did, he said, softly. We weren't finished. Emily backed up instantly. No. Mark, you need to leave, right now. But Mark didn't move an inch. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, with the slow confidence of a man who believed he still had something to hold on to, or someone. Then his eyes shifted to me. John, he said, almost smiling, it's been a long time. Not long enough. Not nearly long enough for the kind of betrayal that lived in his voice. Get out, I said. I will, he replied calmly. Once we settle this. There's nothing to settle. There's everything to settle. Emily rushed between us, her palms up, voice trembling. "Mark, please." But Mark raised a hand. "Emily, don't." The way he said her name, soft, familiar, confident, ignited a fire under my ribs. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he believes he still has a claim to. "She deserves the truth," he said. "And so do you." I stepped forward. "You've said enough." Mark shook his head. "You think this is about the kiss? About a hug in a hallway?" He laughed quietly. "You really don't remember, do you?" I stiffened. Something cold collected behind my ribs. "Remember what I asked?" Mark's smile vanished. "The night our friendship died." Emily grabbed my arm, trying to steady me. But the truth was already rising slow, burning, undeniable. Mark took another step forward. "You stole from me," he said. "Everything." "What the hell are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Emily's grip tightened, fear trembling through her fingers. Mark stopped. "No!" He pointed at me. "John needs to hear this." I stood still. I wasn't afraid of Mark. I was afraid of the part of myself I'd buried so deep that even I didn't know what it remembered. Mark lowered his voice. "You took the job I was promised. You took the life I was supposed to have. You built a future from opportunities I created." And then his jaw clenched. "You took Emily." I stared at him. "You think I stole my own wife?" He stepped closer until he was a breath away. "She loved me first." Emily gasped. "That's not true." "It is," he said, eyes never leaving mine. "You were the safe choice. The stable one. The man who had everything handed to him while I had nothing." "So you kissed her, too, even the score?" I asked. He laughed once. "John, that wasn't a kiss. That was a reminder. To her or to yourself?" The smile faded. He looked at Emily. "You didn't tell him, did you?" Her silence said everything. Mark's voice lowered. "You were mine before you were his." The words hit harder than the footage. Emily shook her head violently. "Mark, stop twisting it. I told you. Back then I didn't love you the way you wanted. I told you I chose John. I told you, and you kissed me tonight," he snapped. Emily froze. "That wasn't a kiss," she whispered. "It was a mistake." Mark's face hardened. "A mistake you leaned into. That did it." I stepped forward, voice low enough to shake the air. "You came into my home. You touched my wife. You kissed her. And now you stand here trying to rewrite history so you can justify what you did." Mark's jaw clenched. "You don't deserve her." "And you do," I asked. Mark's silence was the first honest thing he'd given all night. I took one step forward. He took one step back. "This ends now," I said. "Whatever fantasy you've been feeding yourself, whatever story you think you're living, ends here." Mark's voice shook with something wild. "She was supposed to choose me. She didn't. She still can." Emily stepped between us, tears on her face. "No, Mark, I can't. I won't. Whatever we were back then, it wasn't real. But what I did tonight was real. And it was wrong. I betrayed John. I hurt him. And I will spend every day making that right, but not with you. Never with you." Mark's face cracked. Truly cracked. Like the truth snapped something inside him. He looked at me. "You win again." There was never a competition, but he wasn't listening. He opened the door and stepped out into the falling snow without another word. The door shut behind him. Silence followed, heavy, raw. Emily collapsed into the corridor lights, her hands covering her face. "John, I'm so sorry. I leaned against the bed. Not breaking, not screaming, just breathing. Some endings don't explode. Some endings don't burn. Some endings simply settle on your shoulders like snow, cold, quiet, heavy with things you can't change. I looked at the spot where Mark had stood, where Emily had leaned into him, where my marriage cracked under the weight of a single moment. Then I looked at Emily. We're not done, I said softly. But we're not okay. She nodded through tears. I'll do anything, she whispered. I closed my eyes. Then we start with honesty. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, nothing moved. And for the first time in a long time, the corridor felt like mine again. The truth didn't set me free. It simply stopped running.